Now, we spoke yesterday about the latest figures which suggest parents are facing severe shortage of creche places for babies and toddlers because of the success of the free preschool programme. Today, the Irish Independent reports that the Children's Minister, Catherine Zappone, has stated that the government will need an extra €50 million for the new scheme.
So where do we get 50 million when the budget is already stretched? And when will the government realise that childcare is worth investing in? Joining us with that story and everything else this morning is Ellen Gunning, Director of the Irish Academy of Public Relations. Morning, Ellen.
Good morning.
What is the new scheme that the €50 million is needed for in the first place?
Don't you just love the way Catherine Zappone jumped on top of this? The Irish Independent...
Quick off the mark, wasn't she?
She was very quick. The Independent came out with a story yesterday saying, we have identified. And she's in the same paper today saying, no, you didn't. My department identified that there was a gap in 2017 and we put 4.3 million extra into the childcare scheme, which allowed for, I think it was 1,300 additional places for children. She's actually a victim of her own success. The scheme for 3 to 5-year-olds has been so successful that creches won't take children under 3. And apparently the money hasn't been put into them. The 50 million is to close that gap, it seems, between so many weeks old.
So this is for the baby rooms and to get the staff that are needed for baby rooms.
And apparently even the baby rooms that are there, because they required so much more staff, the number of children was reduced. And there's a very interesting woman in the Independent. There's a piece of a 40-year-old woman who's just had her second child, who runs her own business, who can't go back to work full-time because her 4-year-old is being minded in a creche, and she thought that she could put her second child into the same creche, and they said no. She said, lovely people, they just don't have room. And she's tried everywhere. She's been turned down by either 6 or 8 creches.
See, this is the thing, it has far-reaching consequences, because it basically means a lot of women are going to be forced out of the workforce if they can. I mean, it's an anxious enough time anyway, returning to work and putting your child in childcare. But, like, they might just go, you know what, I'll just stay at home.
I love the idea that the state feels it has a responsibility to provide really good, qualified childcare people to mind children, to allow women to go back to work. But they need to put more money into it. And I found myself wondering with Catherine Zappone, was she actually thinking, well, 3 billion into broadband?
Yeah.
I will now come... Because she hasn't said, nobody has said the government will actually put the money into it. She has said that she will be lobbying hard and demanding, requesting, whatever, 50 million extra into childcare.
For 50 million, which is in the overall scheme of things, a drop in the...
Teeny. Absolutely teeny. But maybe it's that the childcare system can't actually cope with it, because she said part of what they were also trying to do was register more childcare assistants or childcare personnel through TUSLA.
You know the way there's been lots of talk about the Scandinavian model of childcare. What exactly do they do there that is so right?
I haven't the faintest idea.
Okay.
I have no children and I haven't a notion.
OK.
I'm basically a supporter of the idea that the state should allow people to work if they want to.
Yeah.
But how they actually do that, the details of it, not my bag, I'm afraid.
OK, let's move on to story number 2. Owen Murphy defending the co-living scheme, and he says that young workers should be excited about paying less rent for less space. And this is this new development, which he's touting at the moment. It's being funded or backed by Barter Capital. It's a co-living complex in Dún Laoghaire with 208 single-occupancy bed spaces and communal kitchens, each shared by up to 42 residents. All well and good, until you get into the fine detail and you see that each ensuite bedroom will be 16.5 square metres, about 177 square feet. Now, the recommended minimum size for a disabled parking space is 17.2 square metres. So this ensuite bedroom will actually be smaller than a disabled parking space.
I thought it was the bathroom that was going to be smaller than the parking space, but this is actually the bedroom.
The bedroom.
Do you know? And they should be, young people should be excited about the future of co-living.
But you know what? They should be. But the size of the apartments is entirely wrong. I love the idea of co-living. I think it's where people are going. Younger people don't require as much personal space as people like me. They co-work, they share spaces, they work in smaller spaces during the daytime. They're perfectly happy with an arrangement where they have their own space but have an opportunity to share with people for food or for laundry or whatever. And this is actually what sheltered housing for senior citizens is about. It's the same concept. But the idea that you then produce an apartment which is so small that you can barely touch the walls doesn't make sense. I love the idea of co-living. I love the idea of an apartment, a small apartment which has basically a bedroom and a bathroom. I think it's a marvellous idea. And this shared space, I would prefer if you also had a small cooking space so that you chose whether to eat alone or to eat with people.
So
Threshold have described this as 21st century bedsits. Other people have described it as posh hostel living.
It probably is, but it's fit for purpose. If it's bigger, it's it's what young people like. I'm thinking of, we had a colleague, I had a guy who worked with me 2 years ago, an Italian chap, and he loved the idea of having a room in a house and eating with everybody and sharing space with people. And his problem, the reason he moved house, was because the lady who owned the house didn't like them using the other spaces. She preferred that the people who took bedrooms in her home stayed in the bedrooms. But he would have jumped at something like this, probably with a bit more space. I think it's a bit too tight. But he'd have jumped on the idea because he'd have loved it. He'd have had his own independence, plus he'd have had the opportunity. And he's a very convivial, very congenial guy. So he'd have adored this. I think this is the way it's going.
This model has worked in other big cities, hasn't it?
And it's a great idea.
But look at those cities. Now, hang on a second. Look at those cities. You're talking about New York and London, right? And they're tiny. Now, space is at a premium in those cities. Okay. They've gone up as far as they can. They've gone down as far as they can, and they can't go out anymore. We have buckets of space here. There's no need for us.
We don't have buckets of space for individuals on their own. It's a huge problem. There isn't. If you're a family,
we haven't gone up, Ellen.
But we haven't got anywhere that people can go, with the exception of apartments, which younger people find too expensive unless they share with people, or beds in houses, which they can't find enough of. They really can't find good space. I think they'd love this. I think it would work really well, but I think the space is too small.
So Lego box apartments and houses, they're the future, are they?
I think they probably are. And sharing your dinner space with others.
Yeah, that's called home.
So,
right.
yeah, let's talk milkshakes, shall we?
Mr. Farage.
Yeah, go on. So
no, but I mean, look, it's a very divisive election. We have the footage, actually. I mean, I think everybody enjoys seeing Nigel getting a milkshake. So here we go.
Let's have a look.
He was
nice. Hey.
And apparently it was a very expensive one too. It was a salted caramel and something.
And banana. And it was a Five Guys milkshake, which I think is probably too good for the likes of Nigel Farage. You know, it wasn't a generic vanilla or anything.
He doesn't look best pleased there, does he?
Do you know this?
Look good. Oh, I love this. That's an expensive dry cleaning bill. Oh, hilarious.
It is extraordinary, actually, that he was giving out that electioneering, and the campaign trail has now descended to this. When you consider some of the bile that he has spewed out, and some of the racial divisions that have resulted from his, his campaign positions, I think it's a bit rich. But how do you feel about something like that? I mean, we're having a laugh about it because he's a figure of fun here, but actually, when you think of what he stands for and what he might like to do, it's not so funny.
There are two things with it. One is that I found the police reaction strange. The police apparently advised McDonald's within a so many miles radius of everywhere that Nigel Farage was speaking to please stop serving milkshakes for a number of hours beforehand, because they expected that he would be targeted with milkshakes. And I thought, 99 people who drink milkshakes just want to drink milkshakes. Yeah. The other one wants to throw it at Nigel Farage. I thought that was strange. I thought handcuffing the guy who threw it was also a bit over the top, but that was just me with the visuals.
He says he's no regrets, Paul Crowther. He's happy
but
enough.
From Nigel Farage's point of view, I mean, he walked off, he was grumpy, he was marking down his suit, and he was saying things like, you could have seen this coming a mile off. And I think, really, he probably would have been better off just allowing it to stand. He knew he was going to be hit with the milkshake. He's been hit. Carry on. Keep campaigning.
It isn't going to change anybody's mind. What might change people's mind is that there was an extraordinary attack on him by Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister. And effectively, he wants Britain's Electoral Commission to go and investigate the Brexit Party in terms of their funding. And also there were revelations this week that the Brexit Party is not actually a party with members. It's a private company with shareholders.
Now, that's much more interesting. And when Nigel Farage was questioned about it yesterday, he said he has 110,000. He started with 100,000 and corrected it to 110,000 people who have each contributed £25 sterling to become a member of the party. That gives them a war chest of 2.75 million. I think there's a lot to be discovered there. It would be just really curious. They're a party that has come from nowhere. I understand it. They're standing on the same issue that he originally fought. So he's saying, Brexit, elect us to get us out as quickly as you can. So I get that they're very popular and they're winning 34% of the vote. But I think if there's any question over the funding at all, it will destroy the party.
Well, there's a big question about Aaron Banks, who's the man who originally funded his Leave UK campaign, and they have been under investigation, and there's big questions about where that money came from. Apparently, Aaron Banks contributed about £500,000 sterling And where the money came from, nobody's entirely sure. It's very murky.
And it's very public now that Farage has actually said our money is £25 contributions from individuals. There is no big corporate money. There's more there.
OK. Cheers, Alan. Thank you very much for that.
Nice to see you. Plenty more to come on Ireland M. We'll be back after this break.